Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, Senate Committee on Finance, Joint Subcommittees on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation. Would the Secretary please call the roll?
Senators Wynn, Titus, Taylor, Assembly Members Anderson, Brown May, Dickman, Hibbets, Mosca, and Chair Watts.
I am here, and so is Chair Taylor.
Yes, I am.
We have all members.
Asking a question.
We have all members present. Good morning. Welcome to everyone joining us today, both here in Carson City, anyone who's joining us in Las Vegas, as well as anyone who's joining us virtually. We will be going over several budgets in the Department of Corrections today. If anyone would like to provide public comment, we'll be taking public comment at the end of today's meeting. You can call 888-475-4499, and when prompted, provide the meeting ID 812-6516-3753, and then press the pound sign. With that, we'll go ahead and jump right in. So we will welcome our presenters from the Department of Corrections up to the table. I think it'll probably be best if we go budget account by budget account. So we'll have you go through the entire presentation for each budget account, and then after that, we'll pause for questions from members. So welcome. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, members of the committee. Kitty DeSocio, DESOCIO. I'm the Deputy Director of Support Services for the Department of Corrections. We are pleased to be here to present to you the remainder of the Department of Corrections budgets for the 26-27 biennium. We have various Department of Corrections leadership members here today to present to their respective divisions. These budgets are specialized, which is why we have our individual subject matter experts here to present. The first budget is the Offender Stores budget and the Inmate Welfare, account budgets. Here to present those are Adrienne Monroe.
Thank you, Kitty. Good morning, Chair Watts and honorable members of the committee. For the record, Adrienne Monroe, M-O-N-R-O-E, Chief of Offender Services, Nevada Department of Corrections. The Offender Store Fund, Budget Account 240-3708, Volume 2, Corrections, page 142 in your book, is a special revenue fund authorized by NRS 209.221. The account is maintained by the Office of the State Treasurer and receives quarterly interest. Revenue received includes sales from commissary, hobbycraft activities, package programs, surcharges from the sale of specific electronic devices, and vending machine sales in visitation rooms. The account funds its own personnel, operating, inventory, equipment, data processing, and travel costs. Profits from operations may be transferred to the Inmate Welfare Account, Budget Account 3763, for the benefit of all offenders as well as costs on behalf of indigent offenders. Expenses include commissary space rent to the correctional facilities, costs of permits and equipment. The Offender Store Fund also funds the majority of operational costs for the Inmate Welfare Account. As of January 1, 2025, and pursuant to the Martha Wright Reed Act and FCC rulings, all revenue from telephone commissions is strictly prohibited and has been eliminated from the SFY 2026 and SFY 2027 budget. This elimination followed a 2021 FCC ruling number 21-60 that initially reduced phone commission revenue from roughly $4 million per year to $1 million per year on October 26th of 2021. The executive budget recommends funding of $25.8 million in fiscal 2025-2026 and $25.4 million in fiscal 2026-2027. Decision Unit M200 of Budget Account 240-3708 is a caseload adjustment based on inmate population, which decreases store revenues by $513,371 in fiscal 2025-26 and $500,519 in fiscal 26-27. That is the M200 on page 143, corrections. The Offender Store Fund operates with a reserve in order to continue future operations. Increased reliance on this reserve is evident in the consistent decline of beginning cash balances since 2021. In fiscal 2018-2019, NDOC negotiated a new telephone system contract which paid a flat commission amount at the beginning of the contract. The agency received a significant spike in telephone commission revenue, which can be seen in 2020 and 2021, showing the higher than normal beginning cash balance. Several factors have contributed to the steady decline of the beginning cash balance. During the 33rd special session in 2021, $8 million was transferred from the Offender Store Fund's reserve to help the state with its general fund shortfall. Additionally, a change in vendors followed by 2 subsequent FCC rulings which reduced and ultimately eliminated telephone commission revenues permanently. These and other factors have resulted in a 3-year average operating expenditures being nearly $1.5 million higher than our operating revenues. The budget account has 7 sources of revenue. The highest is from store sales at roughly $14 million in state fiscal year 2024. Revenue from the now eliminated phone commissions was in second place, but was just for $1 million per year. Thus, at $14 million per year, store sales revenue is the main driver of funding and support for offender services and the budget account's ability to fund services for indigent offenders through the inmate welfare account. Since the last legislative session in 2023, and pursuant to the recommendations in the 2022 Governor's Finance Office Audit DIA 22-05, the Department has successfully implemented recommendations to include the administrative rulemaking process and to ensure assessments charged to offenders' accounts are reasonable and conform with statutory authority and legislative intent. The Department received input from members of the public establishing new regulations for limits on commissary markups for goods and services provided to offenders and their friends and family. As a result, commissary products and services are now more affordable for offenders and their contributing friends and family. As noted in this graph, going forward, the next trend will show an inverse relationship between cost of goods trending upward and product markups and profit margins trending downward. An offset to this will be potentially new sources of revenue from tablet entertainment media sales. The collaboration with community partners through the 233 public hearing process demonstrates the Department's commitment toward improving quality of life and affordability for offenders, friends, and families. While the Department experienced a roughly 4% higher cost of goods relative to sales over the past 12 years, it is worth noting that it did not increase prices to match the ever-increasing purchase price of commissary inventory. Enhancement Decision Unit E300 requests a small increase of $2,479 for office supplies. Enhancement Decision Unit 306 requests a one-time allocation of $600,000 to support shortfalls in the prison industry's budget account 3719. Enhancement Decision Units E710 through E712 request $18,412 for replacement equipment necessary for store operations, health and safety. Enhancement Decision Units E720 through E722 request $18,515 for new equipment necessary for store operations, health, and safety. The question of solvency for this enterprise fund rests with Decision Unit E906 and the transfer of 20 PCNs to the Director's Office Budget Account 3710 to be funded with General Fund and the elimination of one vacant PCN through Decision Unit E680. The Department has an additional goal of maintaining up to 6 months of operating costs in reserves, which depends in part on current revenue contract negotiations and revenue from tablet entertainment services such as music, video games, and movies. Should proposals E906 and E680 be approved, and depending on future tablet entertainment revenues, preliminary projections indicate sustainability for this budget account, with the possibility of further reductions in prices for offenders and their families. The Offender Store Fund typically makes transfers of roughly $4 million per year to the inmate welfare account to fund inmate programs and services such as athletic and recreation equipment, gate money for released offenders, cremations and burials, satellite TV services for all facilities, and substance abuse treatment programs. This transfer historically includes roughly $2.3 million, which then passes through to budget account 3863 to reimburse NDOC's medical for qualified medical expenses. Although this budget as proposed includes transfer of only $1.9 million in state fiscal 2026 and 2027, there is an amendment currently under consideration with the Governor's Finance Office to reinstate the $2.3 million to NDOC Medical with the transfer category 90 to the inmate welfare account. I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We do have some questions from members. We're going to begin with Assemblymember Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Thanks for the presentation. My question is with regard to E306 and the retained earnings pieces. Specifically, can you give us an update? And I know you talked about it in your presentation, but can you just talk about the implementation of the new tablet program for offenders and explain how that program is going to generate revenue?
Adrienne Monroe, for the record, with your permission, Chair, through you to Assemblymember May Brown. The tablet portion is still in negotiations, so it would be difficult to really speculate about how much revenue that we would expect to gain from those entertainment services. And because it's a new technology in this state, we really don't know how much of that revenue will come from the offender's interest in the downloads and the subscription services. We are hopeful that we would be able to get at least something, a number with six figures behind it to make up for what we lost in phone revenues. But I'm optimistic that it could be higher than that. It just, I wouldn't want to throw out a number when we're currently in negotiations for that portion of the contract. But there will be revenue that was not included in our budget as proposed. So anything else is above and in addition to revenue that were already in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up, Chair. Thank you. I just want to understand, like, how it works. So it's a tablet, and I'm going to be able to download a Netflix movie controlled, and I'm going to pay for that as the offender, right? So we're going to purchase items that go on this tablet that is controlled by NDOC. Is that correct?
Adrienne Monroe, for the record. They won't actually be purchasing and owning the media. They will subscribe to a service. Part of that is because as technology changes, we've gone from score players to now tablets. So we have, offenders that have already purchased and own existing media, and we have to find a way to transfer that in a medium that they can still retain and use what they already own. So the department has worked strategically to avoid that in the future. So as technology advances, we don't have to keep up with that. They can't always transfer from one hardware piece of technology to another because of copyright infringement that has to do with the entertainment industry. So they will be subscribing to like a monthly streaming service, if you will.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Senator Nguyen.
Thank you. I just have a couple more clarifying questions. I know that we have the offender store budget account. How many positions at the end of the day? I know that we've kind of gone back and forth, and we're going to try to move away from having offender families and these markups control those budget positions. So at the end of the day, with the forthcoming amendments, how many of those positions now are going to be are funded through that offender store fund budget account?
Adrienne Monroe, for the record, Chair, with your permission through you to Senator Nguyen. So I believe there will be 48 left. They will be all retail store keepers. There is a program officer 3 who is technically the overseer of all the commissaries that was included in the transfer to budget account 3710. I think because of the classification that it was a program officer 3, but that individual is in fact over the commissaries. So I believe there are 48 that will be left in budget account 3708 that will remain funded. This also makes it a bit more transparent to see the operating costs of the commissary program itself, which is, like I said, the main driver of the budget account and all of the revenue. So from a business perspective, at least for this next biennium, we'll still have those retail store keeper positions within the budget account to see how that business model works to include the personnel for that.
And that additional revenue that you anticipate that you will be able to generate from the new tablet program, that will also go into this fund as well?
Again, Adrienne Monroe for the record. Thank you for the question. Yes, it will.
And I know that you're still trying to negotiate contracts and try to work that out. When do you anticipate that this new product and potential new source of revenue will be available or will start flowing in?
Adrienne Monroe for the record. I think I'll defer to Dee Dee DeSocio. She may be more in the know as to the status of negotiations with the vendor. Thank you.
Kitty DeSocio, for the record. The original rollout date for the tablets was going to be in the April timeframe. We've run into some technical issues with fiber being able to roll these tablets out at the different locations, so we're working through that with our DAG and the vendor. So at this point, I can't really say. We're hopeful for June, but I'd rather not commit to something because we, as I said, we're working with legal teams to get that accomplished.
Do you have a comparison in other states that have rolled out similar like tablet programs on what kind of revenue that this will generate for their states?
Adrienne Monroe for the record. Thank you for the question. There are other states have different contract negotiations, and keeping in mind that with things like the recent FCC rulings, they have all had to completely redesign their budgets because they were building in revenues that they're no longer legally entitled to. And those per minute rates that existed with their tablet programs that may have been 12 cents a minute have been reduced or capped at 6. So it would be difficult to say what their revenue streams are now. I would say, in fairness to some of those similarly sized states, they probably got between 1 and 2 million per year.
Thank you. I mean, I know that it's kind of like a predictive thing. I'm just trying to decide if it's like $10,000 or $10 million, I guess. I think those are following off of what Assemblymember Brown May had asked. Do you believe that revenue, at least in there, I mean, it sounds like that potentially will not, I guess, would the agency have sufficient revenue then to implement that free offender phone calls if the budget amendment a budget amendment to transfer store sale revenue of that $2.3 million each year to the prison medical care account is approved?
Adrienne Monroe for the record, Chair, through you again. It is possible. It really depends on the negotiation. That is whatever the vendor is able to offer to pay for themselves. Nothing is actually free. Someone has to pay for it, and it always comes down to the negotiation between the agency and the vendor. In all likelihood, the state would probably have to pay for those. And to answer the question, it would come down to the number of minutes. If we were to do it department-wide for all of the offenders, there has been speculation and conversation in previous committees about what is a sufficient number of minutes. Is 3 minutes too little? Probably. Is 5 minutes okay? Probably doable. 15 minutes for every offender in the estate would be a big chunk of change, and that might require a collaboration between us and the vendors. I don't know that our budget could sustain that indefinitely.
And I know I had these conversations with the director, and I'm sure you have this information, so I think it would be helpful. Can you put a dollar amount on every additional minute, how much that costs, just so people understand? I don't know if you have that information or if you can provide it, but I knew it was substantial.
Adrienne Monroe for the record. 6 cents per minute per the FCC regulation is the maximum allowable that any prison with our size population is permitted. The vendor is permitted to charge. We are not charging anything.
And across the board, how much does that 6 cents a minute translate if you were to add, like, if you were going to give people like a 7-minute phone call, like how much does that increase the budget along our inmate population?
Adrian Monroe, for the record. These are math questions on the fly, so it would be 6 cents a minute. If someone has a calculator, it would be 6 cents a minute for, you said 7 minutes?
Yes.
Times 10,800 offenders every day for 365 days.
I think the committee can do the math. So it is quite a significant amount to add, even like a single minute additional.
Thank you, I'm good, but I'm not that good.
You know, I obviously, I think I have not made it a secret. Like, I have concerns about using the way we use these, the revenue that we're generating from the offender store budget and the markups on commissary being just so high. Obviously, we've made some changes in the last legislative session to exempt, and I know that your agency has also made changes around, like, you know, health and hygiene products and not marking those up, but I would like to continue to see some of that. During your presentation, you also talked about how this revenue was paying for burials and cremations. Can you kind of elaborate on why there's a decision to take commissary money, not only to pay for those 48 staff positions, but also to pay for burials and cremations?
Adrian Monroe, for the record. Thank you for the question. Offenders that have funds in their accounts to pay for their own burials in their savings account, it's part of a requirement that we have. As funds come in, they are slowly apportioning some piece to have a savings to cover the cost of their burial. Offenders that do not, the inmate welfare account pays for those cremation services and burials.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator. And I was also a little bit surprised to hear about that. I see in some of the other descriptions of items supported by the inmate welfare account, you know, recreational equipment, scoreboard for the basketball facility. To me, those are things that really benefit the welfare and provide benefits to the inmates. Frankly shocked that markup on commissary items is being used to cover burials and cremations for inmates who pass away in our care. And I think just to follow up on some of these comments, I appreciate the honesty and the uncertainty around negotiations and what the realized revenue will be from some of these tablet sales. Obviously, I think many of the members of this body are interested in trying to reduce the scope of things that are being covered through the offender store. And I think there's definitely some concern about some of the budget amendments that walk some of those proposals back and continue transfers, and then we just have this uncertainty, for example, with providing phone calls and what the parameters of that are going to be, and whether that will actually be able to be supported by the revenue from the offender store account, or if it's going to go over. So it seems like there's not really an answer, but at this time, but I think that is something we're trying to figure out as we make our budgetary decisions is, I think there's a support for the direction that we were going. And now, the fact that it was like, okay, we're going to move prison medical care out of this. JK, we're not. We're trying to figure that all out. So if there's any additional information that you find or estimates that you can provide as we go through this process, that would be extremely helpful. I think we do probably have a couple of other questions about the inmate welfare account. I believe we next have a question from Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, that came up quicker than I expected. So can you just confirm that the agency will have sufficient funds in the Offender Store Fund budget account to continue transfers for eligible medical expense reimbursements as recommended through the governor's amendment, which would eliminate Decision Unit 682.
Adrienne Monroe, for the record, Chair, with your permission through you to Assemblymember Dickman. The answer to your question is yes. I have projected a model out through the year 2029, and I'm confident that we would be able to continue to do that if the approval of the decision unit to move the PCNs out and into general fund goes forward. I am confident we will be able to do that.
Good. Thank you for that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And do you have additional presentation on the inmate welfare account? Okay, please go ahead with that.
Thank you, Chair. Again, Adrienne Monroe, for the record, Chief of Offender Services, Nevada Department of Corrections. The inmate welfare account, budget account 240-3763, is in Volume 2, Corrections, page 150. Is a fiduciary fund authorized by NRS 209.221 that is supplemented by profits transferred from the Offender Store Fund budget account 3708. The inmate welfare account provides funding for the welfare and benefit of all inmates, such as recreational programs, satellite television, drug and alcohol rehabilitation programs, services for indigent inmates such as postage, release funds, and costs associated with the medical division and director's office. The executive budget recommends funding of roughly $4 million in state fiscal year 2025-2026 and $5.4 million in fiscal 2026-2027. Decision Unit M200 of Budget Account 240-3763 is a caseload adjustment based on inmate population, which increases revenues by $58,365 in fiscal 2025-2026 and $62,002 in fiscal 2026-2027. On Corrections, page 151. The inmate welfare account operates with a small reserve in order to continue future operations, but it is not a revenue-generating budget account sufficient to support itself. This budget account is dependent upon funding transfers from the Offenders Store Fund. The question of solvency for this fiduciary fund will likely depend upon the current budget request in Budget Account 3708's Decision Unit E906, transferring PCNs to the Director's Office, Budget Account 3710, to be funded with general fund. The Department, in meeting its obligation to receive input from members of the public through the administrative rulemaking process, has lowered markups on food, clothing, and religious items sold in Budget Account 3708's commissaries, resulting in reduced profits transferred to support services to provide to offenders through this inmate welfare budget account. Historical trends of revenues for the inmate welfare account were relatively low. Guidance received through the administrative rulemaking process provided recommendations to maintain up to 6 months of operating costs in retained earnings. This budget proposes $2.2 million in retained earnings in state fiscal 2025 and 2026, and $3.6 million in fiscal 2026-2027, which would be sufficient to fund roughly 6 months of operating expenses, not including the $2.3 million transfer to medical if reinstated. Enhancement Decision Unit E681 eliminates $16,095 in offender debt upon release. This is recoveries revenue. This proposal will increase operational efficiency due to relatively low debt collection rates compared to staff time and resources in pursuit of these recoveries. Enhancement Decision Unit E682 proposes to eliminate the $2.3 million in transfer funds to NDOC's medical division for reimbursement of qualified medical claims. There is an amendment under consideration at the Governor's Finance Office to reinstate this funding. Enhancement Decision Units E710 through E716 request $17,893 for replacement athletic and recreational equipment. Enhancement Decision Units E720 through E723 request $5,566 for new athletic and recreational equipment. Transfer Decision Units E901, E902, and E903 request the transfer of 16 PCNs, including education program professionals, program officers, and athletic and recreational specialists, also known as the coaches, totaling a transfer of $1,681,374 to budget account 3711 programs. I am available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, are there any additional questions for the You good? Okay. Just kidding. All good. All good. All good. So any other questions on the offender store account or inmate welfare account before we switch presenters? Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you so much, Chair. So my question has to do with E903, and that has to do with the additional individuals working with athletic and recreational specialists. Are those individuals that are hired on their own, or are they hired through a school district?
Adrian Monroe, for the record, Chair, through you to Assemblymember Anderson. They are hired by the state of Nevada.
So just to verify, they are not, they do not have a licensure in any way. They are also not, they have not gone through some of the other education programs.
Again, Adrian Monroe, for the record, that is correct.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. We'll move on to our next presenter.
Good morning, everyone. Chair Watts. For the record, my name is Russ Alfano. I'm the Medical Administrator for the Nevada Department of Corrections, ALFANO. I'm here to discuss Budget Account 3706, Prison Medical. The division operates medical and dental clinics and provides health services at all department institutions and overnight infirmaries at Northern Nevada Correctional Center in the northern region and High Desert State Prison in the southern region. The major medical facility for the department is in the regional medical facility located at the Northern Nevada Correctional Center here in Carson, which provides inpatient medical care for serious medical ailments, surgical aftercare, and mental health inpatient services. Medical housing for offenders with subacute mental health issues is also provided at High Desert State Prison and Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center located in southern Nevada. Medical services for offenders at the conservation camps and transitional housing centers are provided by specific institutions assigned for their support. Next slide. Prison medical. The medical expenditures over the last, from 2018 through 2025 year to date, show a moderate and increasing just cost of doing business. There was a spike in 2021 and 2022, which is related to the COVID and the pandemic and the rearrangement of how we do medical care in general in the United States. The next slide is simplistically the cost per offender. Again, the same time frame of 2018 through 2025, showing an ever slight increase over the course of time. These calculations are done simply by taking the total amount of money spent by budget account 3706 and dividing it by the total number of offenders in population served during that time frame. That's been going on since 2016, and it has been presented in the performance indicators with each budget. Enhancement decision units for prison medical. Decision unit E270 requests to add female offender healthcare screenings. This request is contingent upon passage and approval of enabling legislation. That is approximately $145,000 in SFY 26 and $150,000 in SFY 27. Also, Decision Unit E682 eliminates reimbursements for the cost of medical treatment due to injuries inflicted by offenders upon themselves or other offenders, which occur during voluntary recreational activities. That is in NRS 209-246-1 subsection B. And that would be supplanting the $2.3 million with a general fund offset. NDOC is actively working with the Governor's Finance Office on submitting budget amendments to reverse both E270 and E682. And I stand for questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. We do have some questions. I believe we will start with Assemblymember Hibbets.
Thank you, Chair. Can you discuss the primary factors contributing to the projected increases in the cost per offender for medical services in the upcoming biennium?
For the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Yes, we've shown not only an uptick in the frequency with which we are using outside providers rather than our in-network or in-house general practitioners that we have employed, more specialized care and whatnot. We've seen an uptick of about 130% of our offender patients going out into the community or having community providers come into the institutions. That's increased by about 130%. Similarly, the cost per item, I have information available that I can share with this body if that's the desire. The actual, we drilled down to our CPT codes of what the offenders are going out for, and the cost markup increase in the actual CPT code has increased. For example, what oncology was 6 years ago at $236 per unit is now up to $450, and something as similar as that. That's a hypothetical example, but I found that increase has been roughly 152%. So we have an increase in frequency and an increase of cost per unit issued. So that's why it's gradually increasing and increasing.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I believe next we have a question from Senator Titus.
I actually have a number of questions, if that's okay, Chair. First,
We'll let you take a few, and then we'll
Right,
take it from
just-
there.
first, I need to address the last question, and I need some more details. So, I've been on this committee long enough that we were here when we authorized hepatitis C treatment. And I was in favor of that because now there's cures, you get the treatment, you're done. I'm looking at your budget on this, and I think I'd love to see more breakdown. I'd love to see a little bit more information on how many inmates were actually treated. Well, I see you spent $9.1 million in 2022. The average was $4.2 million. You're asking for the same amount, but it's my impression that, and correct me if I'm wrong, initially there was going to be a big push because you had to identify all the inmates that would be entitled to the treatment, and then they're treated. And then you would then simply have it monitored as you have further inmates with potential hepatitis C. Can you explain how this has stayed kind of at $4.9 or $5 million and you're not, I mean, at some point we should see a decrease as you catch up on the treatments that were required?
Chair Watts, through you to Senator Titus. Also, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kenneth Williams, our medical director, who will speak to the clinical side of it. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it was 2020, we had in response to a class action lawsuit, we received approximately $15 million to implement the testing and treatment of all offenders in custody, and to implement a treatment program going forward to include that as part of our intake, to identify and recognize. The first year, we had our approximately 10,500 inmates that were already incarcerated, tested and treated, and that bill was roughly $9 million. And then we balanced forward. We received $15 million in total. And then we balanced forward to the $6 million, and that covered the second year. So in the first year and the second year, we established treatment, and we've also had cost changes in medication. I'm sure you're aware of, where Epclusa went from $15,000 a pill down to $5,000 for a cycle. So we caught up everybody with the $9 million, and absorbed. We received roughly 450 people a month in. So it was an ongoing revolving population that was treated. So $9 million the first year. It was covered with, I think, $5 million the second year. And then as we're establishing this since 2020, now we have a history, if you will, of approximately how much it's going to cost us to treat the revolving population that comes and goes. And that's what's represented in the 26-27 request.
Dr. Kenneth Williams for NDOC. To address some of your questions, also the cost of medication goes up every year. We focus on and give preference to medications that are generic as a cost avoidance measure. But most people don't realize that the pharmaceutical industry, they are actively counteracting our efforts. So they will buy a small company that is producing generic medications, and they will raise the cost of generic medications. So it's a constant effort to recognize cost avoidance. Also, with respect to the Hep C patients, although you treated a large chunk of those patients, that agreement that was made for the class action lawsuit has terminated as recently as October and November. However, our approach is to continue treatment. So we're still taking on the same activities. We have intakes every month, every week. We're testing folks on intake, and we are referring them to treatment. So there is a steady state of cost for that activity.
Thank you for that. And if I might continue just real briefly on that subject. So I understand that, but the way that it worked in 2021, you had to first identify everybody that agreed to be tested, and then you have to agree to take the treatment. I mean, you can't force the treatment on the inmates. Can you tell me what population right now averages? You said about 450 right now are under treatment. Do you have any idea how many right now currently? And do you have anybody that has not been treated that wanted to be treated?
Dr. Kenneth Williams for NDOC. I can get you the exact numbers. I can tell you historically that you're going to see about really 40% of your intake that will still be positive. And yes, we will still offer the opportunity for treatment to those individuals that have refused previously and now they've decided to accept.
Okay. Go ahead.
For the record, Russ Alfano, if I may follow up, ma'am. The 450 is the total number of intake. It's not the people
who
that
are
coming in that are
Okay.
testing positive or have been tested. That's just our average flow is plus or minus 450 a month coming in and leaving. So it's a transient population.
Okay, last question, I promise, Chair. So, new E270. E270, the agency no longer requires $294,000 over the 25-27 biennium for female health exams, as recommended by as in that decision unit E270. Why? I mean, can you tell me? Do you have less women now? Has the population changed? I mean, there's a mandate that women are entitled to annual exams, including mammograms and pelvic exams. So these would be ongoing expenses. So why is that being eliminated?
For the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Our pelvic exams, for example, are done in-house. So the frequency is just more of a demand on our in-house providers that we employ. The mammogram exams, and I'm going to defer to Dr. Williams to the clinical end of it, but the rate at which we were able to, with qualifying incidents and whatnot, it really was what we anticipated when in the budget build, why E270 was created, was we anticipated a 100% saturation, and what it actually is turning into is something different, and we feel that we could absorb that in just the standard care of Florence McClure Women's Correctional Center.
I just want to make sure that the women are getting these exams, that they're not going to be turned away, that the annual exams that are necessary are being done. And so thank you for that explanation.
Dr. Williams, Medical Director for the record. I can also add for the record, we recently entertained an amendment. The original law that was passed said all women every year. So clinically, there in the field, in the community, it's not necessarily appropriate for a 14-year-old, 15-year-old to have a mammogram at that age and then every year, because that is an unnecessary risk and exposure. So the new proposed edit will result in following more community standards. So every year, starting at 40, and then of course, as on a case-by-case basis, if there is a personal history, if there's a family history, if there are some other risk factors involved, then obviously those individuals would be tested or have mammograms earlier than 40.
So I absolutely understand, as a clinician myself, you have to follow the recommended guidelines. I just want to make sure that we are treating our female patients in our prison system based on recommended guidelines for what is the needed exams, both pelvic and mammograms, and whatever other recommended exam is. And so that just sent up a little red flag to me that that was maybe not being done. So thank you for the explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the questions.
Thank you. I also have a question on this. Can you just discuss why the budget amendment was submitted to essentially remove or walk back the general fund appropriations and instead continue transfers from the offender store fund to support the prison medical care budget account?
You're referencing E682, correct? Yes. For the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. Under Nevada Revised Statute 209-246-1, subsection B, the Department of Corrections is allowed to be reimbursed for actual costs of medical expenditures as a result of harming yourself or others, or a sports-related injury, such as an altercation or something as such. We pay the bill on their behalf, Prison Medical, enjoying discounts through a network, contracted network providers and whatnot, and the actual dollars that we spend on treatment for those, as a result of those events that qualify under NRS 209-246, we are allowed to recoup from the inmate welfare account. And basically, it's our 7-year average has been about $2.3 million, and it is provided to us from inmate welfare it's a general fund offset of $2.3 million that we are able to earn as a result of the statute that's in existence currently.
Okay, thank you for that. So you explained how statute allows, but it sounds like doesn't require you to. You brought forward a budget that proposed ending that practice. Now there's a budget amendment that says, JK, we're walking that back. Why is that being brought forward?
Want to answer that, Kitty? For the record, excuse me, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator, Nevada Department of Corrections. We have the ability to earn that money as a general fund offset. We have personnel in place to extract that, and it's been part of our budget since I've been there, since 2010.
Thank you. So I think you've given a lot of history about why it was that way. You're not answering the question of why did a budget get proposed to us that moved away from that historical practice, and now there is a budget amendment submitted by the administration to undo what was proposed in the governor's recommended budget. Why?
It's a technical, for the record, Russ Alfano, Medical Administrator. It's my understanding that this is a technical adjustment because the intent in removing the $2.3 million per year was to ensure that copays were not assessed, and this is not copays. In the 82nd session, Senate Bill 416 walked away copays, and the mechanism to collect copays for offender care was removed, and it was eliminated from our budget. We did not, our practice stopped in April of that year, prior to the codification. and the adjustment was made to the budget, I believe they thought they were taking away the copays because there was a word copay in a line item in Dawn, and it is not. It's a different mechanism. It is not copays. And I believe the intent was to remove the copays from the budget, which would have been appropriate based on the codification of Senate Bill 416, and this does not affect that.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, Kitty DeSocio, for the record. Basically, we're just correcting an error that occurred in the budget build.
Okay.
It's not for copays. Russ has already explained that, but so we're just correcting it's a technical adjustment to correct a mishap.
Okay. I think I have a little bit more clarity now. So it sounds like at some point somebody thought that this was related to copays, although what I'm hearing from the department is that it is not. And so the budget amendment was brought forward to rectify that. Another budget whoopsies. Okay. Members, any other questions on the prison medical account? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the next budget account, which I believe is correctional programs.
Good morning, committee members. I'm here to present on Budget 3711 programs. The Deputy Director of Programs, my name is Emily Testweed, EMIOY-TESTWUIDE for the record. As you may already know, correctional programs play a crucial role in rehabilitation, reducing recidivism, and minimizing idle time within correctional institutions. These programs, which include educational courses, vocational training, reentry services, pro-social activities, substance abuse treatment, and cognitive behavioral therapy, provide inmates with essential skills and knowledge to reintegrate successfully into society upon release. Studies show that inmates who participate in educational or vocational training are significantly less likely to reoffend. By equipping individuals with job skills, mental health support, problem-solving techniques, these programs can foster long-term behavioral change and reduce the likelihood of returning to prison. Idle time in correctional facilities often lead to negative behaviors, including violence, gang activity, and mental health deterioration. Engaging offenders in productive activities keeps them occupied, reduces institutional misconduct, and fosters a structured routine. Programs such as work assignments, skill-building workshops, pro-social activities, reentry services, and rehabilitative counseling create a sense of purpose and discipline among offenders, promoting a safer correctional environment. Investing in correctional programs is a proactive approach to criminal justice reform. By reducing recidivism and keeping offenders engaged, these programs not only improve public safety and the safety of our facilities, but also reduce the financial burden of repeated incarcerations. The Nevada Department of Correction offers a variety of programs and services to address criminogenic risks and needs, reduce idle time, increase pro-social activities, and provide access to educational and vocational opportunities. These programs and services are provided by internal DOC staff, through partnerships with state and local agencies, local school districts, colleges, volunteers, and community-based organizations. The NDOC is continuously working to bring in new programs and services to address gaps and needs across the department. For E263, this request transfers revenue from the Department of Health and Human Services Director's Office to NDOC budget account 3711 to support a substance abuse counselor position. This position will oversee contract staffing and support of MAT programming MAT and MOUD programs within the department. E301, this request adds in-state travel for psychologist visits. This additional funding was requested in order to support mental health staff travel to Ely in support of offenders and their mental health needs. Due to the challenges of hiring needed staff and the increase in population, this funding is necessary in order to continuing to provide care. E302, this funding is necessary due to an increase in costs and use of translational services, language link, during service provision. E303, this request funds the training provided by the Board of Regents, UNR Center of the Application of Substance Abuse Technologies for staff, continuing educational units, professional development, and compliance with state and national standards. Each training course is allocated 30 individual seats for NDOC staff to participate. Pricing increased from $1,500 per session to $3,500 per session. E304 and E305, this requests funds costs associated with equipment purchases. E901. Thank you. Sorry. This request transfers 3 positions consisting of 1 education programs professional, 1 administrative assistant, and 1 student worker from inmate welfare account 3763. This request aligns with the 82nd Legislature request to move positions from accounts impacted by offender and family purchases to general fund. E902, this request transfers 5 program officer positions from inmate welfare account budget 3763 to 3711. And it's also to move positions from accounts impacted by offender and family purchases and costs to general fund. And lastly, E903, this request transfers 8 athletic and recreational specialists positions from inmate welfare account to 3711. This request aligns with the 82nd Legislature request to move positions from accounts impacted by offender and family purchases to general fund. Thank you, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I believe we have a question from Assemblymember Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this summary and this important work in the correctional programs. My question was, I know in this budget account, there is a recommended transfer of 16 positions from the inmate welfare account to the correctional programs budget account and has a corresponding funding source change for the positions to the general funds. So if that's approved, how would the department utilize the freed up store sales revenue, and would that mean that commissary product markups could be reduced as a result?
Got some movement here.
Adrienne Monroe, Chief of Offender Services, for the record. The answer to your question is yes, it absolutely would free up funding as part of our business plan going forward, and as a result of the public hearing process and receiving input from members of the community. It is our goal for those budget accounts to create the retained earnings at a level that could support 6 months of operations. They didn't have that before, they're having it now. But absolutely, it also, in our draft regulations as a result of these, the input from the public, our goal is that anything in excess of 6 months of operating reserves, we have within the year to bring before, I believe it's BOPC, Board of Prison Commissioners, a recommendation how we want to give back to the offender community with any of that money. So it's not just a big stockpile, it's a healthy stockpile to keep us at a nice stasis. And anything else, we will look for ways and solicit their input on what they would like to receive as a benefit of any surplus funds.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I believe we have a question from Assemblymember Brown May.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. My question is on this new substance abuse counselor position, E263. So a couple of questions, right, with the chair's indulgence. There's been some recent news that's come out of Washington, D.C. with regard to cutbacks for SAMHSAs and, so all substance abuse and mental health services from a federal level. We have the opioid recovery funds, right? We have the settlement funds. I'm curious to know, first of all, how will this role, the substance abuse counselor position, align with the goals of the opioid needs assessment statewide, right? That would be my first question. And then secondarily, with regard to how there's a number of there's a significant uncertainty with regard to federal supports. Is this the right time to build out additional supports? Are we meeting the needs currently with regard to medication-assisted treatment and therapy for folks who have substance use disorder? And I'm just wondering if you could talk that through a little bit.
Dr. Williams, Medical Director for NDOC. So I'll work backwards. Are we currently meeting the needs for medication-assisted treatment? The answer is no. This is actually work that has been in process in the build, a plan that actually started before I got there, and I've been there a little over a year and a half now. We have been working on a collaborative effort with DHHS and the SOTA, the State Opioid Treatment Authority. And so funds have been identified from the opioid settlement to build out the treatment program because it's a statewide initiative. So it's a collaborative effort. We have a substance use treatment director, but that person is focused on programming. They have been helping with getting the infrastructure up and running, but they don't have the bandwidth to also manage the implementation and expansion of a medication-assisted treatment program. Having a counselor and having that person serve as a supervisor to oversee 4 LPNs that will be strategically located throughout the department to actually manage the program is the right direction for the state to go in to ensure appropriate treatment for the population.
Thank you. I appreciate the explanation and as well as the focus on recovery, right, for folks that are in our corrections institutions. It's so essential knowing that we are facing federal changes and the level of uncertainty. I would just simply offer caution that we continue care and invest in that way while solidifying the programs that we have currently so that we don't go backwards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, are there any additional questions on this budget account? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. I believe we'll move on to prison industry.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Bill Quenga, that's Quenga, Deputy Director of Industrial Programs. And to my right is Justin Pope, who is the ranch manager, and down in Las Vegas is my admin services officer, Jeffrey Doucette, and they will interject on certain points here. So Prison Industries budget account 3719, the operations at Northern Nevada Correctional Center include furniture, upholstery, metal fabrication, and mattress shops, along with printing, bindery, screen printing, and embroidery services. Lovelock Correctional Center shops produce draperies and institutional garments, along with partnerships with private enterprises. Prison Industries at Southern Nevada Correctional Center offers automobile restoration services to include upholstery, offenders in the prison industry program at High Desert Prison recycle used playing cards. Under NRS 209461, that's the authority we fall under. To go into the enhancements, I'm going to turn it over to Jeffrey Doucette, who is our ASO down in Las Vegas.
Oh, thank you. For the record, my name is Jeff Doucette, D-O-U-C-E-T. I'm the Administrative Services Officer for Silver State Industries. The first enhancement is E300. This is for our out-of-state travel category. This fund requests out-of-state travel to visit correctional industries and includes reviewing other state industries, operations, and training programs. These purposes can include reviewing machinery from a similar producing correctional industry, meeting with correctional industry peers to assess the impacts of a new industry or to gain insightful operational trends for existing industries. E301, this requests increases to uniform cost. This is for our correctional officer positions in prison industries. E302, this requests funds for out-of-state travel. This is for our training category. This is the training category. Training is used to attend correctional industry-specific training conferences, which includes the National Correctional Industry Association Conference. This is specific to correctional industries and promotes a sharing of resources, operational strategy, identifying additional industries and revenue sources. It's also an opportunity for new staff to better understand correctional operations. And Deputy Director Cuengo, did you want to elaborate on the NCIA conferences and NCIA in general?
Yes, for the record, Bill Cuenga, Deputy Director, Department of Corrections. It's important for this budget for myself and the staff of Prison Industries. We also include, for example, a warden, an investigator to join me in this conference. It brings focus in the prison to where they can see what reentry, what correctional industries does. In our program, like our mission is to reduce government operating costs, provide the offender skills necessary to successfully reenter society, and enhance the safe operation of correctional facilities. And that's our mission. It's important for this conference. Also, this will come up in the next budget regarding our Farmers Association. And I'm open for any questions on this budget.
We have a couple more enhancement accounts.
Sorry about that.
Once again, Jeff Doucette, Administrative Services Officer. E304, this is for correctional officer positions in prison industries. E305, this request eliminates 4 positions consisting of 1 prison industry supervisor, 1 marketing coordinator in Southern Nevada, and 2 correction officers. These positions are currently vacant and have been vacant for several years. These vacancies represent a salary savings which is rolled over to subsequent years' budgets. And then we have enhancement unit E306. This is a one-time request. This request funds a one-time allocation to support projected negative retained earnings. In state fiscal year 21, Silver State Industries was mandated per AB 3 of the 2020 31st special session to contribute $250,000 from its prison industries budget to the general fund to assist with the state budget. And with that, we'll take any questions on this budget account.
All right, we done? Great. So I think first we have a question from Assembly Member Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question has to do with the profitability. You're able to set the price, understand that there's a process to do so for these items, but can you discuss why the product prices has not been increased in a manner to improve that profitability? If there's a way to have that discussion.
For the record, Bill Cuenga, Deputy Director, Industrial Programs for NDOC. We do a review. We do a product pricing review. For instance, we quote our standard products. We quote that and keep an eye every quarterly. We look at materials. We have a wood contract in place, so we maintain that price. But we look and see if the materials have gone on certain things like drawer slides, labor and all that stuff, and time to produce if it changes. Custom items, we quote the best that we can to give the best price. We also do a cost analysis on a production closing to see, did we overquote, do we underquote, and try to meet the margin. Also keeping in mind of what's in the market. Apples to apples and orange is we've got catalogs out there with huge vendors, suppliers that quote, but they do not produce the same quality products that Prison Industries manufactures. But we keep an eye to keep our profitability up in all our shops. And
follow up, if I may. I respect that. You know, that's That's good business practice. But you have to dip into your reserves, it looks like, often. So has there been any discussion about raising those prices to reflect the expenses that we're all hearing about are going up with everybody? Has there been that discussion in a much more thorough fashion, I guess? Because looking at some background information, it looks like you've had to dip into your reserves a few times. So just wondering why it's not quite, why the prices are not going up to reflect the need, especially with the supplies.
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, NDOC. We are constantly looking at our pricing, but we don't want to price ourselves out. Currently, with my accounting team, we are going to be traveling around and looking at our operations. One of the things is that we're looking at is our cost overheads. We pay utilities for the facilities that we occupy in NDOC. So we pay, that comes out. So we have to reevaluate our overheads, SG&A, to ensure that we're covering all our costs. So if our fixed costs, all my staff need to know what their fixed cost is per month. So if our fixed cost for the furniture shop is $10,000, just turn that light on and come in, we got to double that. We got to make $20,000. And we're reviewing that at this point.
Thank you for bringing up the overhead, because that does make a big difference. So thank you so much. And then my other question, follow up if I may, Chair, sorry. My second question has to do with who you're working with. I know that in May, I think we had approved working with some other partners. So just wondering if there's an update on those efforts to add, I think it was Sustainable Reform Solutions and Carson Truss as those partners, and also if there's any others that you're currently working with or attempting to work with.
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, Industrial Programs. Yes, so Sustainable Resources, we're still in negotiations. In that partnership, we found out with ePro, it kind of became a little issue. So we had them register, make sure they're fully registered with ePro and registered Secretary of State and all that, the proper process. So they will start selling to the state. Once they see that the market is there, then we will open up an operations down at Florence McClure Prison to hire the female offenders to start that process to produce those ink cartridges and ship them out from there within the state of Nevada. Carson Truss, we're still working. However, there's kind of been a delay with building homes out there and watching the news. Prices are going up, tariffs and all that. So we have a trust company in Reno that we've been working for at least 5 years. We have offenders that are transported out there by one of our officers. That operation is stopped now for about another month because of the tariffs and all that, and it concerns me. I will be talking with the president of the company here shortly. But with that said, the same company out of Arizona, they just purchased a over 500 square foot facility just north of the Gene Conservation Camp. And I'm very excited about this because they approached me. We're going to have some female offenders, approximately 8 to 10, out there cleaning the facilities. They're going to pay for it. Once they get that facility cleaned up, they're going to start implementing where they're going to do wall panels, floors, and trusses also. I'm excited because the women at Gene and the female population in our prison, we haven't had an industry program for them. So I'm very excited. So with that program there, over 500,000 square foot, I can probably use 50% of that population where they can just walk there. We'll get them a bike or something. We'll have an officer, depending if it's the custody level, minimum or community trustee, and put these female offenders to work, and they'll be earning at least minimum wage.
Thank you. And you'll be bringing an update to us?
Yes,
I hope, when that's ready.
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, we have a question from Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Deputy Director, for the presentation. I'm learning so much this morning. You mentioned for the women offenders and the hopeful new project, right? And I love your enthusiasm around that. That's awesome. They'll make at least minimum wage. Is there a wage, like say for the other projects that you're already working on? Do they all make minimum wage, or does it vary? What is so? There are a couple questions in that. Yes. How much do prisoners get paid? Period. And then does that vary and so on? Please, sir.
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, Industrial Programs, NDOC. So we have a program called Certified Program, which is the PI program, Prison Industries Enhancement Certified Program, which is part of the NCIA, which we're being audited here in the next month. We did a desk audit last year. We passed with 100%. I'm proud of that. My staff really work hard. So the PI program, we must pay the 10 percentile, the prevailing wage for that SOC code in that geographical location. So the community, we have to pay them, in the contract I always put, minimum wage would be set forth by whichever is greater, state minimum wage or federal minimum wage. Now we know the state minimum wage is higher, so that's what we're going to be pushing for is 11. Our welders that are in the welding program, they fabricate beams and they get certifications in partnership with Western Nevada College. They're getting their applied science technology degrees, and they're welding in there. We're welding for subcontractors up in Tahoe, Truckee, and Donner. Those welders are making $14 an hour. And that's because we cross state lines, and that's a federal Department of Justice and BJA directive. It'll be a misdemeanor on my part if I didn't follow that. So every year, about January, February, we send a letter to DETR, Department of Training and Rehab. We send all the SOC codes, and then they in turn send it back to my ASO. We review it. We send the new rates out to the shops to ensure it is put in place no later than June 1. That is our anniversary date, and what we do is we quote, if we get it sooner, we try to do a 30-day prior to, because if I enact it on June 1 and I quote a job before June, the auditors kind of frowns like, why paying them $14 and it's $14.75? So I try to send the quote to the contractors with the new rate as soon as I can, because when that job opens up and we carry on, it rolls into the new fiscal year, the anniversary. So I don't want to get caught with paying less than what we should to make it fair. And anytime they quote me $14.75, I always have my shops do $14.76, because I had a super mathematician come in there with a calculator and I was off by 0.01. And that's not happening again. We do have traditional, our standard products, anything that stays in the state. We have job codes and job specs. So a sawyer is a person that cuts the lumber raw process, so we use dimensional stock. So it's quoted to where they get a percentage of the sawyer, then it goes to the carpenter, then it goes to the finisher, then the final finisher, and then packaging. So they can range anywhere from $1 to $5.50 an hour. The incentive is they build the product in less amount of time that's quoted, they make more, they move on to next product, and they keep going. So it motivates them to do and not just sit there and, I got one bookcase to do, I'm just going to make this much today. So it incentivizes them to produce and take pride in what they produce.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to hear the high end, of course. Do you ever find any issues with, I'm only making $1 an hour and he's making 14, or she's making 14, or whatever?
For the record, Bill Quingett, no. So there's stepping stones in our industry program. They come in as a porter, and then they shadow a carpenter and work on. It's up to them. I give them that stepping stone. If they want to participate in the welding program, which is very, very, everybody wants to do that program, but I can't hire everybody. I tell them, you got to succeed here first and master this first. Once you can show me that you can do that, we'll move. And then I run the operations. I try to mimic the private sector as much as I can. And we are in a prison setting, but I treat them, my staff treat them, and we train them just like they do on the streets, so that when they become released and eligible to go out in the community, they're not stopping by a door jam and putting their hands up to be searched. We try to run it as a normal business so that they get that, that dignity and wanting to work in it. Everything's voluntary in prison industries, but they have to earn it and prove that they can move to the next step. And it's not just about the dollar. An offender can save $80,000 and go home, but did he correct and take action on the substance abuse or any other issues? So they also have to learn how to budget. And I tell them, I've been here for 30 years doing this program. I'm passionate about it. And I've seen offenders in there that have life sentences without. Laws change, and I teach them that. Laws change. Don't think about, I'm never going out. Think about when I get out. Start planning now. So I try to instill that positivity in their brains so that they can be, re-entering society positively from our experience.
Deputy Director, your passion on this program is absolutely obvious. So thank you for that, and thank you, and congratulations on the inspection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I believe we have another question from Assemblymember Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the follow-up. So during that discussion, again, the passion's wonderful, and hearing about the wages that the prisoners will be able to make. What is the deduction, or how much then those wages, is 100% of it, minus the taxes, given to the workers, or is the industry, or in this case, the department, able to hold on to some of those fees as well?
For the record, Bill Quinga, Deputy Director, NDOC. This is quite a complex thing with Marcy's Law. It's become, I can't even really keep track. But in industries, it is to where we take 24.5% for room and board, 5% for victims' crime, and then 5% for capital improvement. However, that doesn't always stand, and I think Adrian Monroe would probably be better. I hate to volunteer here, but they do the inmate payrolls. So we process their pay, it goes to inmate banking. They do, if there's court fees, there's so many things, who's on first base, second base, I can't even keep track. I'm just glad that inmate banking can do that, and then they get whatever they get on their check, because it's processed electronically through inmate banking. Hi, Adrian.
Adrian Monroe, Chief of Offender Services, for the record. So the amount of deductions depends on the type of wage or contribution from friends and family, which we refer to as non-payroll. And we do have a spreadsheet that we use, and I have submitted it to other committees. I'm happy to provide it to you too as well. That kind of prescribes, and we enter into each offender's bank account so that as money comes in, the system itself will follow the directive that my staff puts in. So if it's institutional or PI's payroll, if it's less than minimum wage, then the max cap is 50%. If it's greater than or equal to minimum wage and it's institutional or PI payroll, it's also max capped at 50%. Court filing fees would come out first at 20%. Then next in line is restitution, victim-specific restitution at 10%. If it's less than minimum wage, we don't take child support. If it's greater than or equal to, it's 20%, 5% for capital improvement. If it's less than minimum wage, we don't do DOC sanctions. If it is greater than or equal to, it's 25%. And after that, I'm sorry. I'm getting off line here. Sorry, DOC sanctions are 15% for less than minimum wage or greater than or equal to. And then Victims of Crime Fund is 10%. Looks like 5%. I'm sorry, it's a little hard to see here. Sorry, 10% for savings, 5% for Victims of Crime Fund. Restitution, non-victim specific, is 5%. So the max in that institutional or PI payroll would be 50% that they could take out. And so it goes in that order until it reaches the 50%.
Thank you. That's a lot of percents. It sounded like far more than 50%. So it seems like some of those are never reaching, but appreciate that. And yes, if you could provide that to the members of the committee, I think it would also be helpful for us to understand. I think, as you mentioned, there's kind of a difference between inmate income from working in prison industries versus money that comes into inmates' books. So if we could kind of get maybe a side-by-side or something to that effect, that would be very helpful. So thank you for that. We will move on to Senator Nguyen, I believe.
Thank you. Sorry, I honestly start to see red when I hear about some of the policies that we have in place where if you engage and you work and you're even paying back restitutions to victims in cases, and then you pay for your room and board, and have very significant deductions that make it, there's every incentive to do nothing, because if you do nothing and you don't work, you don't pay for your room and board. So, sorry, just more of a comment than anything, but I'm going to get back to an actual budget question that I have regarding your budget. When we're talking about some of the elimination recommendations, I believe your agency is currently authorized for 9 correctional officer positions, and it looks like there is a recommendation for elimination, and that would eliminate some of those positions, and it seems like 4 of those 7 correctional officer positions are currently filled. So I'm just kind of wondering where that's going to take place, and that elimination, like, are those people being relocated to a different area? I guess I'll start there. And then ultimately, like, what kind of impact will those recommended position eliminations have on the prison industry's operations?
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director Industrial Programs, NDOC. Those positions that we're recommending to eliminate are not filled. Those have been vacant, so nobody's losing their job. What it is we're trying to maintain our profitability as we are mandated by law. And so we haven't used those positions. We're kind of changing gears a little bit to relook at our mission and how we interact with the public and try to bring on more enterprise. We still like the state programs, which is great, but we had to reduce that. There's been a lot of challenges since I've been in this position. I know in 2010, they took $940,000 out of our CAP. Then with COVID, the $350 out of our ranch and a retain, and then $250 at 3719, which is PI. So we try to build our retained earnings, and my staff really work hard. But then when that is swept, it makes it hard. So we don't want to be operating where we have to live by paycheck to paycheck. I won't work that way. It's not fair. And so with those positions, we're going to move them out. At a later date, we may come back and ask for those at a later date.
May I follow up with an additional question? That kind of answers a little bit of my next kind of follow-up to that same topic. Obviously, it sounds like you're trying to manage the prison industry operations, and are you looking at pulling any custody staff from outside of prison industry's budget account and incurring additional overtime to meet any of those operational needs?
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director. No, ma'am, we are not pulling anything. We have one officer, so it varies from institution. And I've been working with the director on this to re-examine this. So at High Desert State Prison, I have one officer that oversees a card sorting program. At Southern Desert, I have 2 correctional officers in there's auto restoration program. We have that supervisor position. We posted it. We weren't very fruitful on that. And it becomes challenging now because all the correctional officers' salaries, industry supervisors used to be here and correctional officers here, and now it's like that. So nobody wants to work in prison industries because of the pay difference. So the officer that I have working at prison industries at Southern Desert is managing that for me and is doing an amazing job.
I recently became aware of what I'm going to call NDOC's like overtime issue. So I just wanted to make sure that we're not moving people around, further increasing, which is a very big over budget like fund on overtime. So I'm glad to hear that you're having that, and I recognize some of the issues you're having.
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director. In prison industries, anytime overtime is required or needed, I am very adamant about prior approval. I need justification. Why are we doing it? Is it because we need customer needs? Then how does that shrink our profitability, what we quoted? We have steel jobs that we've gone into, and the customers say, hey, we need this a week earlier than that. Well, guess what? We got to work overtime. I'm doing an upcharge. We cannot inherit that cost.
Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions. First one, you noted this is an enterprise account. It has to support itself and stay afloat. I think you noted the sweeps that occurred. I was there when those sweeps happened. It was an unpleasant time for everybody. I'm a little surprised that it took us this long to get to the point of addressing that and attempting to restore it, since that's almost 5 years ago. But definitely understand that. I think my concern is that restoration is one time, and there are some ongoing concerns about making sure that this account can be self-supporting. So do you have anything that you'd like to add in terms of a plan for long-term to ensure long-term sustainability for prison industries?
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, NDOC. Yes, we are working with partners, and every time I'm working, member of the Northern Nevada Development Authority and the manufacturers in the western states. NCIA. We're always looking as to, with my peers, as to what are you doing, what are they doing, and try to capture that, bring it back, and not have to reinvent the wheel to make it work for us. So we're going to be more active in working with our partners out in the community to bring business in, to overflow, and really watch. My staff and my county team are very good stewards of our budget. And we just need to really look at it again. I know we're doing a good job, but there's always room for improvement. So we need to start reaching out. There's so much competition out there. A lot of the new state buildings that came up, we didn't even have an opportunity to bid on that, or we're even called. And I'm kind of upset about that, but it is. So we just got to move on and figure out how do we miss it and how do we capture it moving forward. I try to pay attention to the Board of Examiners to see who's building a new building and who's getting furniture, and then I get my staff on it and reach out and meet with them in person, not email.
Thank you, and I bet Mr. Rob's ears are ringing as a result of that comment. So the one other question along those lines, I know there are several partners or industries within the program. You may need to follow up because I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. Do you know which of those industries are operating at a loss?
For the record, Bill Quenga, at this point, I don't have that information. I can supply that to you afterwards.
If you could follow up, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, members, any additional questions on prison industries? Seeing none at this time, we'll move on to the ranch.
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, Industrial Programs, Department of Corrections. Budget account 3727, which is the prison ranch. The prison ranch is a self-supporting operation. Income is generated from the sale of livestock, organic waste management and compost, and housing and feeding wild horses for the Bureau of Land Management. Under contract, the ranch cares for up to 2,000 horses and burros, providing saddle training for up to 100 horses per year. The prison ranch maintains an agreement with Nevada Parks to use irrigated grazing and hay land in the Fort Churchill State Park. The prison ranch currently provides work for approximately 65 offenders. The Nevada Department of Agriculture houses a small number of stray horses for short-term holding at the ranch before being offered for adoption. And just to add, the Bureau of Land Management, we're in process of, and I'll have Mr. Pope elaborate more on that contract, and he can talk more about that. I just want to add that just a couple weeks ago, we had a very good horse adoption program that came out. We had probably over 300 people come out. We had 19 horses. They were all auctioned off or adopted. I hate using that word auction, adopted. And the average price for the adoption was $4,500. To include, we're very proud. Mr. Pope does a great job. We supply horses for law enforcement, the U.S. military, Marine Corps, Army, Forest Service, and all that, and also New York PD and then Quezon back where they do military burials back east. So we're very proud of that. We have one of the best training programs in the United States. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Jeff Doucette to go over the announcements.
Button, there it goes. I was pressing a button, it wasn't working. All right, for the record, my name is Jeff Doucette, Administrative Services Officer. For this budget account, we have an enhancement unit for E300. This is out-of-state travel, very similar to the one for 3719, used for various purposes specific to the prison ranch operation, including identifying equipment, machinery, and replacement parts, vendor supplier research, or reviewing similar operations from other states. E301, this adds physicals and driver certification. We have two positions that are, commercial driver license at the ranch, and this is the, the certification and driver stuff for that. E302, this request adds environmental evaluation applications and permits review assistance. This is specific to SETS contract 29110. The contract was issued for the labor, equipment, and materials required to complete defined work with the approved vendor. The ranch anticipates the possibility of having to complete a few large projects to maintain compliance with the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection permits held in fiscal year 28 and 29, with engineering services for these projects to begin in 26 and 27. E303, this request increases funds And on this right here, this is my apologies. This should be a reduction, not an increase. So think of that 120 for E303 and E304 with parentheses around it. So this request is a reduction in the based on price fluctuations for the Prison Ranch dairy operation. And as we mentioned before in our questions, expenses include the feed and farming supplies associated with the pods and the milk production operation. E304, again, this should be a reduction. This request funds for price fluctuation for the ranch operation. When the dairy operation was paused, the ranch no longer needed to produce grain for the dairy cows. Those funds were used instead to produce hay for the BLM horses. E306, this request funds a one-time allocation to support projected negative retained earnings shortfall. And again, this is related to AB 3 from the 2020 31st special session, where we were mandated to contribute $350,000 from this budget account to the general fund to assist with the state budget. And with that, we are ready for questions in this budget account.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. We'll start with questions from Chair Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that report. I do have a couple of questions, if I may, Chair. I have go through a couple of them. As was said earlier, we know this is an enterprise account, right? But we also can tell, because we have a little chart here, that the retained earnings are decreasing, right? And obviously I know that's not ideal. So given those shortfalls and the questions about the solvency of this, because it's trending in the wrong direction, are there measures that you've taken to decrease expenses? I know you're trying to increase revenues, but how about the other side of that? Are there measures you've taken to try to balance that out?
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, Industrial Programs. I've met with my team, and I'm going to defer over to Justin Pope, who is the ranch manager who manages that program for me.
Justin Pope, for the record. We have tried to manage expenses the best we can. Our revenue's based, a big part of our revenue is based on our contract with BLM for feeding horses, and we established those prices in 2018 when we negotiated that original contract. And at that point, we had the highest hay prices we'd seen were $240 a ton, and then in 2021, 22, and 23, we saw a hay price spike of $375 a ton. And so basically our expenses had doubled, and there really wasn't anything we could do because we were locked in on that contract with BLM. We try to source hay in large amounts to reduce the cost, but again, with us having that $350,000 swept, it kind of took the ability away from us to be able to do the large amounts, the large quantities, and so we're having to buy smaller amounts throughout the year, which is costing us more. We, as a result, had to shut the dairy down because the dairy grain had almost tripled the feed that we feed the cows, and so we shuttered it for the time being. We're kind of reevaluating that program, how we can restart it, possibly buying fluid milk or maybe looking at powder. Doing a powder reprocessing and kind of supporting our local dairy farmers here with having them supply the milk. So we're kind of going through and reevaluating that. We are in negotiations with BLM on another 5-year contract. We submitted a proposal. We hope to hear back on that sometime in the next 6 months. But for the time being, our current contract will expire the end of this month, and so we've also submitted a proposal for a bridge contract for BLM. They're reviewing that right now. It does have a modest increase, and the hay market is so volatile. Where we were paying $375 a ton, well, now we're back down to $175 a ton right now. So it's just, it was a set of circumstances. If you look at the chart in our retained earnings, we're definitely trending in the right direction and looking pretty good up until 2020, 2021, and the inflationary pressures that everybody felt hit us, and it caused a definite decrease in the retained earnings. And then coupled with the sweep of that 350 was just the perfect storm of things that happened that made made operations very difficult. But yes, we are working it from both sides. We're trying to reduce costs as much as we can, yet still offer the offenders, as much wage as we can through our program, and also trying to negotiate a little bit higher price from our other contracts.
Thank you, follow-up chair, just on that. I love the idea of prison JK, of prison ranch. I love the idea of that. And so I'm wondering, other than BLM, which you've talked about hopefully being able to increase that, and the governor has a couple of transfers, are there any other ideas that the ranch can increase retained earnings? Because there's still going to be a concern about that trending in the wrong direction.
For the record, Bill Quinga, Deputy Director of Industrial Programs. So we're hoping that this contract, once the federal government figures out where we're going with it, it's kind of like a pause, then a bridge contract, and we want to get into a real 5-year contract. With that said, we got the horse program, but we also have a great partner at the prison ranch who is Full Circle Compost, NV Organics. They went, I would say 3-4 years ago, they were only hiring maybe 10 or 12 offenders working. They're down up to what now, 25, 30, I think it is, and they're paying them a good wage. They have a great operation, and I invite the whole committee here, please come out and see our operation. It's amazing to see what the offenders are doing. They're happy to be there, and our staff, we take a lot of pride in what we do. But that partner is growing and has other ideas. He bought this Full Circle from another local owner and has just grown that operation. So we're getting more revenue. The more offenders head count goes in, we get a percentage of that coming in. He's also increased the contract to get more acreage, which we generate more revenue from there. So he keeps growing, and we have other ideas working with his partner. One of the other things we're looking at is developing our own CDL program within prison industries at the ranch. I'm talking with Wyoming, Montana through my NCIA peers, and Justin and I have been working on that. It's just a matter of what do we do with DMV? How do we get them down there? Working also with WNC, where we can do their testing because they can do the curriculum, but they can't do the testing. There's certain parameters. So we're trying to work with WNC to bring, because Full Circle Compost has, I would say, probably 30, 40 semis coming in every day bringing chips, wood chips, and they have a contract with a vendor that I can't mention, but it's a huge operation. All those semis coming in, so we get our CDL program, we can get these offenders at the ranch to get their CDL, and then they would drive those trucks from, I believe, Fernley back to Carson City. They would park that truck, go to sleep, wake up, do it again, and when they get out, they will be hired by that company out there or independent contractors. So we have more of that, and there's a partnership. So we're always looking for ways, and my team and I, we're always looking for other ways. Keep in mind that we will not, our mission is not to displace the private sector. I will not displace the private sector. During the recession in 2008, we had a partnership with Shelby Corporation, and we talked about it. Like, you got civilians out there, they need to feed their families too. We feed them in here, so we'll shut the operation in agreement. And we're looking at probably trying to bring that back again at Southern Desert.
Well, thank you. Love the ideas and just really appreciate the work that you're doing. And one of these days, I'll get out there.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions as well. One of the things, because of the similarities and overlap, has there been any consideration of essentially combining the prison industries and prison ranch budgets?
For the record, Bill Quinga, I would have to look into that. I mean, I never thought of that. We tried it because agriculture, and then regular manufacturing, so that's why we kind of keep it separate. But it might be something I'm open to looking at, maybe see if that's even, is it feasible? Is it going to help us? Who knows?
All right, great. Food for thought.
Yes.
So I heard a little bit about some of the challenges in terms of hay prices fluctuating, some of these other inputs. I think one of the things that we had seen in some of the other initial responses that you provided is also that because of this kind of cash flow issues, there's struggles with purchasing things in bulk and realizing savings that way. Can you just talk to that and again, given some of the historical cash flow issues, but as well as the proposed transfer, any ideas on how we can address that, right? Because price of hay, not much we can do about addressing that volatility. But if some of the other input costs, we could realize some cost savings by purchasing in bulk. I think that would be helpful for us to understand.
Justin Pope for the record. Yes, and there are certain times of the year where it's better to buy hay. If we're coming into the early summer, late spring, a lot of times we could take advantage of farmers cleaning out their barns to get ready for the hay for the next season, and it's a great opportunity to be able to take advantage of that when we can. And then obviously when the hay is coming off the field, that's a lot better time to buy it, and we could see a pretty substantial savings. We feed upwards of 7,000 tons of hay every year, so we're buying an awful lot of it. And typically we try to do 3,000 ton contracts at a time, and we'll try to set that up where in the spring we get one out there to try to take advantage of that leftover hay from the year before, and then try to get a contract of the new hay coming off. But again, the retained earnings issue has kind of prevented us from doing that. We've had to do smaller contracts, and we had to buy at non-opportune times to get that.
For the record, Bill Quenga, Deputy Director, Industrial Programs. One of the things I like to see also is with a contract, the way we got to go through contracts. I've done this in the wood shop, in the metal shop with our vendor. Is perhaps I can work with state purchasing procurement into where we need multiple vendors, all right, to compete out there. If we have multiple vendors and we lock them in like our plywood, hardwood, we had plywood and hardwood contract and furniture. I separated those two so you can be more competitive. If you put them together, you're not going to get as many people bidding on it. So some people specialize in hardwood, some specialize in plywood. So I split that out, and now we've got a better pricing because we have multiple vendors. And fortunately, we're lucky we have a vendor, and I try to keep it in Nevada. I try to keep my purchasing in Nevada. So perhaps I can work with state purchasing and my team to see if maybe we can try to make this a little more competitive, bring more people in, and then target to where, hey, we're going to buy from this month to this month. But we have got to have that retained earnings to buy the purchasing power. But we need that funding there, because if our retains are down, we're going to be pricing ourselves out. So we're sending out more than we are bringing in.
Great, I appreciate that, and I have one more question on that note of retained earnings. So obviously we know the budget process takes some time. I'm just wondering, as we're now a little bit further into this fiscal year, do you have an update or a projection on what the ending balance in the Prison Ranch budget account is going to be at the end of this fiscal year, and how that compares with the starting balance that was included in the governor's recommended budget? Essentially, are we still on track, or are we seeing some deviation one way or another?
For the record, Bill Quing, I think I'll defer that to Jeff, but I don't have that information readily handy, but I'll be happy to get it to you.
Yes, and for the record, Jeff Doucette, Administrative Services Officer. We have that information. I don't have it here, but we can get it to you. We project out continuously our budget accounts for both budgets.
Thank you very much. Yeah, if you can provide that as a follow-up information to our committee staff, that would be very helpful. Members, any additional questions for Prison Ranch? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much.
For the record, Bill Quing, again, I invite you all to come out and take a tour, please.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our business for today. The last item on our agenda is public comment. If anyone would like to provide public comment here in Carson City or in Las Vegas, please make your way down. Again, if you would like to provide public comment by phone, you'll please call 888-475-4499. When prompted to provide the meeting ID, enter 812-6516-3753 and then press pound. So, would anyone like to provide public comment today in person? Seeing no one coming forward, AVH, do we have anyone wishing to provide public comment by phone?
Thank you, Chair. The public line is open and working. However, we don't have any callers to provide comment at this time.
All right. Thank you very much. That concludes our business for today. We're adjourned.